Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Merry Christmas. Rod here at A Better Way to Farm, where we improve yields and increase profits. We're working our way through the 12 days of nutrients. It's one of our favorite things to do. We're super excited to be sharing this. And today we're going to talk about phosphorus, the second of the three macronutrients. Coming from our sheet, the roles of the essential nutrients in crop development. What does it have to say? It's involved in photosynthesis, respiration, energy storage, energy transfer, cell division, and cell enlargement. It promotes early root formation and growth, and guys, that's important. Whereas the nitrogen promotes growth in vegetation, it does not promote root growth, and phosphorus does. That's one of the reasons that early phosphorus is so critical. Early available phosphorus is key to getting maximum yields. It's going to improve the quality of the fruits, vegetables, and grains. It's very vital for seed formation. It helps plants survive a harsh winter. So if you're putting out wheat in the fall or some crop that you want to make sure that takes it through till spring, that's why foliar feeding wheat, foliar feeding alfalfa is a good idea to help with that winter kill. Adequate phosphorus increases water use efficiency, and it will hasten maturity. For those of you boys farming and girls farming way up north, what do we want to do? We want to beat the frost man, right? And so we want to do everything we can to help that crop reach physiological maturity just as fast as we can. I am rocking my favorite cow sweater today. I hope all of you have a great Christmas sweater that you're excited about and you get to wear on an annual basis. As we start looking at all of this, I'm going to start first with the fertilizer handbook. It's one of my favorites, and see what they have to say here. And they have some things that are pretty profound, and it comes right out of the Dry Fertilizer Institute. They talk about the fact that the total phosphorus content in the plow layer of many soils is 2,000 to 3,000 pounds and above. As a matter of fact, they do say that 80% of that phosphorus can be in the organic form. However, the soluble form, which is what your plants absorb, is only a small fraction and generally occurs in concentrations of 0.01 to 0.1 part per million in the solution. Here's some of the situations that we fight in regards to phosphorus. Much of the soluble form added in fertilizer quickly reacts with iron, aluminum, clay, organic matter, and carbonates and becomes unavailable to plants. For such reasons, a crop seldom recovers more than 10 to 20% of direct applied phosphorus. 10 to 20% of broadcast phosphorus. And guys, I'm going to take a little detour here, because this is why I am so nervous about the byproducts and the different things that you can get. When someone comes to you with a byproduct or some kind of a industrial waste or something that's coming out of a municipality, and they talk about that it's really cheap or it's really free, those are something that some of that stuff is good. We've seen water treatment lime that was pure, okay? We've also seen these products have tons of mercury, arsenic, lead, cadmium, all of the poisons that you don't want. And a lot of them come with aluminum. And I want to reread this. Much of the soluble form added in fertilizers quickly reacts with iron, aluminum, clay, organic matter. Guys, we have plenty of aluminum in our soils. If you want to do something interesting, send your soil test in and have them tell you how much aluminum is already in your soil. We've done that here on our own farm, and it's kind of scary how much aluminum we have. It is not a plant essential element, and it does tie up everything that it touches. And so that is not our friend, and therefore we want to be very, very cautious in applying anything that puts more aluminum on. In regards to runoff, the fertilizer handbook says, since runoff, especially erosion losses of organic matter and colloidal particles with absorbed phosphorus, accounts for the greatest loss of phosphorus by far from agriculture. Guys, phosphorus, very little of it leaches, but we lose a lot through erosion. Sediment from cultivated land has an average phosphorus content of 1.3 pounds per ton, and erosion losses from cultivated land commonly transport 5 to 15 pounds of phosphorus per acre per year. With high erosion rates, we could 10 to 25 tons of soil per acre. phosphorus losses may reach 30 to 50 pounds per acre annually. And guys, this is where we come in. We come back to the same thing. We have to regulate ourselves before someone else regulates us. And if we start feeding that algae in that hypoxia zone down there in the Gulf of Mexico and that continues to grow, regulations are going to continue to come our way, and we are never going to like what those regulations do to us. And it comes back to the same thing. I don't want nitrogen running off my farm, and I definitely don't want my soil running off my farm. So the question becomes, how are we going to manage our farms to reduce erosion? And you say, I would never lose 5 tons to the acre. I have to wonder about that. I got some farms down here next to me, and there are ponds down there, and I can see the deer walking through the ponds. I was here when they dug the ponds. I know they were 18, 19 feet deep, and now I watch the deer walk right across the pond and never get their knees wet. Guys, it's a significant thing, and we want to be paying attention to it. There was a study done years ago. It says one of the most extensive studies of nutrient losses from various land uses was done on areas that drain into the Great Lakes. They did both the U.S. and the Canadian portions and included both sides of that. Here's what they came up with. It is obvious from these data that the changes in land use, that would be converting forest into cropland or residential use, have a significant impact on the quality of the runoff. Nitrogen loads from cropland areas were 4 to 5 times greater than nitrogen removals from forest land. We get people say, well, that nitrogen is coming from leaves, it's coming from dead decaying deer, it's coming from all of these things that natural, and there is some. I'm not going to deny that. It is also not deniable that it was 4 to 5 times greater where they had no forest land and they converted it into farm ground. Total phosphorus loads from cropland was 7 to 10 times greater than the forest land. Did you catch that? The phosphorus was 7, 10 times greater than the forest land. Guys, that's not our friend. It's an environmental issue, but it's an economic issue, and it's going to become a regulatory issue if we don't figure out how to get a grip on that. And I just want everyone, again, what we're trying to do here is get everybody to think, to ask some questions, to say, hey, what can we do to farm more efficiently? Hey, how are we going to make more money next year? One of the ways is don't let nitrogen go down the creek. Don't let phosphorus go down the creek. Keep it in the field and use it where we need it. They said since phosphorus reacts quickly with calcium, iron, and aluminum compounds, it will only move a short distance, typically about 1/10 of an inch per year. Knowing that, this is important with the standpoint of application. For instance, in a no-till application, that's why we see the guys talking about stratification, that top inch of their soil may have super high phos levels if they've been no-till for a long time and they've always just been broadcasting over the top. And that's what makes placement your friend, especially in a no-till application, but in all applications. Phosphorus from surface applications does not penetrate the soil to any appreciable distance and will be subject to positional unavailability when the soil surface is dry. It's going to take a lot of moisture to get that phosphorus to move into the soil solution. Phosphorus reactions with high calcium soils are termed reversion. What this means is that they tend to revert the phosphorus back to compounds like the ones in the phosphate rock that was used to produce a fertilizer in the first place. The immediate availability is unquestionably lower than it is in the form when it was applied. So, guys, for those of you who farm in that high pH ground, we know, we look at so many tests, and we see tests where they have a P1 of 3, 5, 7, really low. And of course, people say, oh man, you only got 5 parts per million. You got to put a lot of phosphorus on. And they go out and they broadcast a bunch of 1846O, 1152O, whatever it is. And when they do that, all they do is watch their P2 go up. I see guys with a P1 test of 5 and a P2 test of over 100. That's a huge span. You guys know that ratio should be 1 to 2. That's one of the things we look at in a soil test, is what's that ratio between P1 and P2. We've seen it be 24 P1 and 25 P2. That tells us something is broken. We've seen it be 5 and 100. That tells us something different's broken. Typically, when it's real broad, real wide like that, what's broken is it's a high pH soil. When we get into high pH, high organic matter, and high CEC, that's the trifecta that just absolutely makes broadcast ineffective. So what do we do in that application? We row place, because that's the key. Put it in the trench, protect it, have a hot mix ortho, hope the roots get it because they're going to grab it right away. what micronutrients we're going to use. We're going to come back to this, but just so you know, we're only going to put about a pint of zinc in that band, maybe a little bit of manganese to help with emergence, but it'll be a very little bit. The rest of the micros, we have not found a chelator yet that will survive high pH, high organic matter, and high CEC. It just rips the chelators off. So what does that mean? What means foliar feeding is your friend, and that's the best way to farm around those issues. When we're farming in other applications, we know that banding is better, and we're going to get into some of that here. Out of the Western Fertility or Western Fertilizer Handbook that we have, they've got a page in here I really like where they go through all the different elements, and they talk about what these plant foods are and what they do, and then also maybe what their symptoms are of being deficient. Again, phosphorus is essential to all plant growth. It's an active ingredient in protoplasm. It stimulates early growth and root formation. We're in agreement here. Root formation is key. It hastens maturity, promotes seed production, contributes to the general hardiness of the plant. What are the symptoms of phosphorus deficient plants? Number one, small growth, especially root development. Guys, this is why Roplay Starter is such a friend. We know that phosphorus doesn't become available in the soil till a soil temperature of around 60 to 65 degrees, right? And when we know that, and we plant when it's 50 to 52 degrees soil temperature, which we need to in order to get the GDUs that we want, we know that's important. But the fact is we don't have that phosphorus available early on. And that gives us those weaker roots. What happens then? We're more prone to it falling over. We're more prone to not getting enough moisture. We're more prone to not taking up enough nutrients. We're more prone to a less healthy plant. That's why Roplay phosphorus is your friend. You also end up with delayed maturity and spindly stalks. In extreme cases, you can have purple discoloration on the foliage of some of the plants. The tips of your older plants may look dead, and you'll have a poor fruit and seed development. Guys, this brings me to one of my phrases that I really, really don't like. As a matter of fact, I tell you that if your consultant comes to you and there's two phrases that he can use that I think in English actually mean fire me. The first phrase they'll use is they'll say something to the effect of, you'll probably get away with it. Probably get away with it means I'm reckless. When I tell you that, it means I need the sale. I want you to buy it, and I don't have any regard for what's going to happen to you. So you'll probably get away with putting this product on the seed that could cause some problem and smoke the germ. Guys, that's not prudent, okay? I don't like the phrase, you'll probably get away with it. Second phrase that they'll come to that makes me cringe is they will say, it will grow out of it. And this is very common with purple corn. If we plant and we didn't use Roplay Starter and it gets cold and wet, our corn turns purple. And they come out and they put their arm around you. That's one of the key. They put their arm around you. It's really important. They look you straight in the eye and they say, hey, it'll grow out of it. Yeah, it's phosphorus deficient. It'll grow out. Guys, it'll grow out of it is not the question. I know that. I've never harvested purple corn. However, the question I want to know is, what did it cost me? You know, I had some friends that spread urea on a few years ago, and I said, I'm not really a big fan of that. I know you can spin urea on and it goes fast and it works. I said, but your nightmare is a 1/10 of an inch of rain. They got the 1/10 of an inch of rain. The urea activated on the plant, didn't wash it off, and the whole field just turned golden brown on top. And of course, the people who convinced them to do it came out, put their arm around them. What'd they say? It'll grow out of it. Did it make more because they put the urea on? Probably. But if they had used 28 with Y drops, how much more would it have made? What did it cost me to singe those leaves on the top? That's the thing that we're always looking at. It's not will it grow out of it, it's how much did it cost me. And this day and age, guys, in 2026, as we start looking at what we're doing here, we can't let stuff grow out of it. We have got to get every bushel that we can get for a good investment. We need ROI. You know, I think I told you guys, but I had a guy that I'm talking to, and his local retailer sent him a spreadsheet, and by the own retailer's number, they were going to lose $75 an acre on corn, but they were encouraging everybody to grow corn. I'm not going to get into why I think that was. I have some opinions. I'll let you draw your own. But he said, dude, you're showing me losing $70 to $75 an acre here. As well, we think there'll probably be some marketing opportunities through the season. Yeah, well, the farmer is betting his financial future on that. And guys, that comes back to you'll probably get away with it. You'll probably get away with this, or you could bleed equity to the tune of $70 an acre on 2, 3, 4,000 acres and mess away $250,000 worth of equity in one growing season. I don't think we can bleed equity anymore, guys. We've got to come up with ways that we nail that down, that we do not do that ever again. From the Soil Up by Schrieffer, he gets to talking about the information on P1 and P2, that the P2 will always be a larger number of P1 because the extraction method is different. That is absolutely correct. They use a weaker extraction method for P1. That's designed to say, this is what is plant available. This will show us how much we can get into the plant. P2 is a stronger extractant. It shows you what you have in the reservoir and should be turning into P1. There's a third phosphorus number, and that's that one that they said was 3,000, and Dr. Mulvaney would say over 6,000 pounds. The top 6 inches of farm soil in the United States typically has somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 pounds, depending upon who you're talking to. And you can check that. Take a soil sample, send it into Midwest Labs, and have it ash it, take it all the way down to its elemental form. The deal is, how do we get that non-available phosphorus, that stuff that's completely tied up, to break loose? That has to do with soil biology, and that's where the micronutrients come in, and we're going to talk about that at another day. But all of it ties together, folks. When the people come to you and they go, oh, you just need this nutrient, the answer to your problem is nitrogen. Just put on a lot of nitrogen. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. And by the way, you should leave. Oh, the answer, just calcium. You just pour the calcium to it and that's it. Wrong answer. Hit the road, Jack. Because there's no one single nutrient that makes it. It's a combination of doing everything correctly. The people that are growing 280, 300, 320 farm averages, those guys are doing everything to the best of their ability correctly. As we start looking at what he has to say there, he talks about the fact that a low soil pH is going to increase iron and aluminum. And what that's going to do is that's going to tie up more of your phosphorus. And therefore, as these iron and aluminum phosphates are very stable and they tie up that phosphate in forms that's unavailable to the plant. Reason 731 that it isn't just nitrogen or it isn't just phosphorus, it's everything. See, we do have to do the calcium. We do need the base saturation correct. We do need that pH between 6.2 and 6.8 to the best of our abilities. For those of you who are stuck with pHs that are 7, 7.2, 8, 8.5, then we got to farm around that. We have not found a judicious way in order that we can drop pH. I think you could probably put enough sulfuric acid on, maybe, to lower that down, but if you did, you're going to kill every living thing in that soil, and it's going to be cost prohibitive. And so I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer in that case is farm around it. But for those of us who farm where we fight pH on the low side, that's an easy fix. We're going to talk about calcium. We're going to talk about, do you need high mag lime or do you need high calcitic lime? You know, do we want dolomite or do we want calcitic? And we'll get into that. But here's what I'll tell you. We want lime. We want that to be correct because our phosphorus is much more available when we have the right pH. And so when the guy comes out and his deal is, he comes out and goes, phosphorus, that's the nutrient that you need. That's the only thing you need to worry about. Hit the road, Jack. Get out of here. Because the fact of the matter is, can I hide a pH problem? Kind of. I can put on way too much phosphorus and hopefully get some of it to go into the plant. But I still got all my other nutrients that are less available because my pH is wrong. Why would I want to do that? Address your pH, guys. We don't sell lime. We just encourage you to use it and get it correct. And if you need some help with that, reach out. We've had several people who we've helped find quarries around so they can get the kind of lime that they need. He also goes on to say, for those of you up north, your high sodium levels also reduce your phosphorus availability. That is not your friend. Here's something that nobody wants to talk about. Occasionally, we will not want to build the P2 level of phosphorus. In a soil condition that severely locks it up, we would instead place the phosphate in concentrated bands while trying to correct the conditions that tie it up. If the soil test indicates that limestone is needed, phosphorus should be banded instead of broadcast until that problem has been cured. Banding minimizes exposure in comparison to broadcasting. Ladies and gentlemen, that is true. And when you get into the high pH, there is no fix-it. So therefore, banding is our choice. And that's what we have to do in order to successfully work through all of the issues that we have with that soil. And again, coming back to the fact that he believes strongly in the triad, nitrogen, phosphorus, and zinc will always function better in combination. So what does that mean? That means, guys, that we want to make sure that we're doing the right things. When we do things right, it's never wrong. It pays us dividends, and we end up making extra money as a result of what we do. Neil has a lot to say about a lot of things, and I really appreciate what Neil's done and the work that he has done, the fact that he studied with Dr. Albrecht at Mizzou, who I never got to meet but wish I would have, one of my heroes. And in regards to talking about phosphorus, one of the things that Neil points out is phosphate levels will go up if the microbes have enough residue to break down. This increase from the breakdown of residues and not from phosphate is applied. What's he saying? If we can recycle our residue, we can pull a lot of phosphorus right out of that in obviously a plant available form. Here's something for you guys to think about as you start looking at different forms of phosphorus. And I'm going to talk to some of you guys who are going to continue to broadcast. We're not here thinking everybody's going to dive on what we do and say we're going to do 100% with you. And that's okay. Our job is to bring value to help you make better decisions. So why does a soil system tie up triple super 0460 and why does it not tie up 1152O or MAP? Triple super has a pH of 3 or less. When you put something that has a pH of 3 on a soil, it has a pH of 5, 6, 7, 7.5. How long do you think it's going to stay in that form? The answer, in his words, not very long, with an exclamation point. When you put a pH on, when you put on a material with a 3.0 pH, it will combine with calcium because the phosphorus is attracted to the calcium and it's drawn to it in the way that many Southerners are drawn to back-eyed peas. That's his words, not mine. But we just got to know, folks, that when we apply a low pH product, it's going to get more tied up. That's the bottom line. And we like to stick with something other than triple super. Yeah, you get a lot of phosphorus and sometimes it's cheaper, but you just get pounds. You don't get necessarily something that's usable and ready to go for you out there. He goes on to say later in the book, and this is something, guys, I'll probably come back to and hit this again because this is really important. In our fundamentals of agronomy, we show some slides and we do some work talking about how much nutrients are taken in by the plant in the first 25 days, the first 50 days. How much nitrogen, how much phosphorus, how much potassium. And you're sitting here today, you're listening to me talk about the importance of early plant available phosphorus. That's why we've always, we started out using 1034O because we had a lot of P and we know we need phosphorus, right? We know we need it for root development. I'm not arguing that, but here's the deal. Let me share these numbers with you. And I've seen these a lot of places. I've seen them in Pioneer's work. I've seen them in college work. And here it is coming from Neil, which I assume actually came from Dr. Albrecht. In the first 25 days of the life of a corn plant that makes 180 bushel, that plant will take in 19 pounds of nitrogen. It will take in 4 pounds of phosphorus and 22 pounds of potassium. We're going to come back to that. But know this, in the first 25 days, we need 4 times as much K as we do phosphorus. We need almost 6 times as much K as we do phosphorus. We need almost 5 times as much nitrogen as we do phosphorus. And then when you go back into the next 25 days, all of a sudden now you're looking at 103 pounds of nitrogen and 126 pounds of potassium. We need more potassium in that plant by day 50 than we do nitrogen. And the kicker on the deal is the phosphorus that we're going to take up is only 22 pounds. At this stage, it's 4x. It's phosphorus at 22, and basically K and nitrogen are both at around 100. And so we've got to really be paying attention as to how, that's why we prefer a 315-19-3 or a 318-18 as a starter, because yes, we want to meet that phosphorus need. We know we need that root development. However, we also know that the separation between the doing greats and the doing not so greats partly has to do with how much K can we get into the plant. By day 100, it's 226 pounds of nitrogen, 234 pounds of potassium. And when we start looking at how much more N and K it takes, that makes a lot of sense to make the case for those high K starters. Coming out of the Midwest Laboratory Handbook, I love this book. Guys, this is a really easy read, and it is just loaded with information. I would encourage you, download this, print it off, and go through it and read it and highlight it. It's all tore up. The cover's about loose. It's been highlighted. It's got highlighters in 5 colors. It's got ink pens in 4 or 5 colors, notes in the margins. And I just love this book. But they're talking in here to remember this, that phosphorus primarily goes into the plant in an ion of orthophosphate or dihydrogen phosphate, H2PO4. And the problem is getting enough of this form in there because the reactions in the soil make the water-soluble phosphate into water-insoluble phosphates. They come back to this. Acidic soils having excess iron and aluminum and basic soils having excess calcium cause a chemical recombination of acidic forms, and therefore your water-soluble phosphates are way less soluble. And they've got a graph in here, which I'm not going to bore you with, but it is in here and it shows you exactly how much that is. They say that supplying phosphorus has a threefold purpose. Number one, to furnish an active form of phosphorus as a starter fertilizer for immediate stimulation of the seeding. Now, I'm not saying you're using a starter. I'm saying you got to have enough starter out there enough fertilizer out there that it acts like a starter. You have to have plant available P from day one. And the best way to do that is to row place it, but you have to have it. Number two purpose, to provide a continuing supply of available phosphorus throughout the entire growing season. And number three, to ensure a good reserve supply in the inorganic or mineral form, the organic form, and the absorbed forms. It is a well-known fact that most crops get 10 to 20% of their phosphorus requirements from the current year's fertilizer application. The rest comes from the soil. When someone says, you're not putting enough on with starter, my answer is, I agree, and I know that. All right? I openly admit to that. And you're not putting enough on with your dry either. Again, going through the math, using 20%. If you put on 100 pounds of 1840-60, what have you got? 9.2 pounds of available phosphorus. If you're using 318-18 at 5 gallons to the acre, you have 11.2 pounds of available phosphorus. For those who struggle with math, 11.2 is bigger than 9.2. Okay, that would make the arrow, the pointy part would go to the 9 because it's less than. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing to get that in there and get it where it's in the plant the way we want it. They talk about the fact that banding puts readily available P sources at the root zone. It is superior to broadcasting, and they just keep coming across that over and over and over. And the last thing they say is that under calcareous or alkaline conditions, to prevent fast tie-up, banding of the fertilizer near the side of and slightly below the seed is available. Weak starter solutions are also of value. The bottom line is, guys, they were writing this before I think that there was much work on anything done with orthophosphate and the products that are neutral pH, have no contaminants in them, and are seed safe. The reason we soil test is to make sure that we're seed safe. We know there are certain parameters. If the organic matter is above 2 and the CEC is above 10, we're safe to go on the seed on corn. When we get less than that, now we got to move away from a row tube and get into a splitter, and we can get into some stuff that's so light that we have to go to a 2x2 band. We're not a fan of a 2x2 band, but what we're mostly a fan of is making sure every little seed that you plant germinates, because they are super expensive and we want them all to grow. If we didn't want 34,000 plants, we wouldn't plant 34,000 plants, or whatever number it is that you're actually working on. Guys, throughout this series, I'm going to talk about the fact that putting more on is probably not the answer. That's not where we're going to get to. I do want to address the idea of grid sampling, and I here, especially in regards to phosphorus, and I just want you guys to clear your brain, forget what's been beat into you, because I'm old enough to remember when they said, you need a grid sample and variable rate, and everybody's like, whoa, that's stupid, we're not going to do that. And then, of course, repetition is the mother of convincing, and they went it over and over and over, and we did it. And I just want you guys to follow me here, okay? So you're going to grid sample, and you're going to go out, and you're going to pull a core every 2.5 acres. You're going to pull a sample every 2.5 acres. You're going to send that in. And that one core, or that little bitty sample, is going to represent that whole 2.5 acres. What if you hit a hot spot? What if you hit a weak spot? Is it really representative of the whole 2.5 acres? See, we believe if you're going to grid, that you need to take that 2.5 acres and bust it up into 9 squares and pull 9 different cores from 9 different places, mix those together and let that represent the 2.5 acres. We've actually got some work being done right now. One of my friends out in Western Iowa is working on a project, and he is finding a lot of things that necessarily aren't working the way we thought they would. They originally told us, we were going to grid sample, we were going to variable rate, and we were going to even the fields out. Now, that didn't really work out. So now a lot of times they're saying we're going to grid sample, and then we're going to variable rate by yield maps. Okay? I'm not saying good or bad on either one of those. I'm just wanting you to think about this. And I really want you to think about it from the build standpoint. I had a new client come to us, not this past week, but the one before. And he had pulled out some soil tests. He'd listened to what we had to say, and he had looked at soil tests. He'd been in a build program for 20 years. And in 20 years of a build program, his levels had changed very, very, very minimally. I'm talking like 2%, 3%. And I invite you, go pull your old soil test. If you can't get your soil test, that's a giant red flag. And we run across growers all the time who say, I don't have my soil test. Someone else has them and they don't let me see them. Guys, I'm very confused by that. But the fact of the matter is, look at your soil test. Track them over a period of time, because you have the right, you're the one spending the money. All right. You're spending the $100, $200, $500 per acre, whatever it is. You have the right to see that data, and you should be looking at that and saying, am I getting what I'm paying for? Maybe your yields have went up, and that's good. They should. But we also want to make sure that we aren't putting on more and more and more product to get that yield, that we're not spending more money than it's actually advantageous for us to do, because it's all about return on investment. And guys, here at A Better Way to Farm, the number one thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that, you make money this year. We believe what you put on has to show an ROI, and you got to get yield now. The number two thing that we believe is that the yields you're growing today will not let you continue to farm 10 years from now. And they definitely won't let your children or your grandchildren take over the farm 20, 25, 30 years from now. We have to continue to maintain and get those soil tests to get better in the event that we're going to do anything. Now, there's also some guys that are on the other side of that. Some of the guys who've been putting manure on at levels that I don't want to know about. And I look at those soil tests and they've got P1 test of over 100. I want to encourage you, you need to stop it. There should be, we don't do this, but if I had my way, our soil test would come back, and there would come a point in time where at the P1 level of a certain number, it would just have in big red letters, it would say stop it. Because when we over apply phosphorus, what happens? Now, that's at the expense of all kinds of other things. Number one, it's at the expense of zinc. Okay? And when we put on too much of one nutrient, it's always at the expense of others. Go back and look at Mulder's ball and look at all of the different things that's interacted by the different nutrients. And too much of any one nutrient is going to not be to our advantage. It also is going to encourage runoff. That's where we're going to start seeing maybe some leaching, if we're going to get it, is at those really high levels. And that's the last thing on earth that we want. So guys, we hope that you're finding value here in what we do. I'm really looking forward to day 3 when we're going to talk about potassium. I have a lot of new stuff on that. Every year we come up with new things. We redo these and try to come up with some new things to share and bring out. If you have questions on what we've done, reach out. We're here. We're going to help you with anything that we can do. If you'd be interested in going to one of our fundamentals of agronomy, we invite you to reach out. Text Karen at 641-919-5570. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your time, and we do hope you're going to have the merriest Christmas ever.